welcome to the Island Lamb. I'm Diane, and this is episode 51. Spring knits and refresh, revive, rework, reimagine. That's kind of the mood I'm in right now. And so I hope you enjoyed the opening footage. That was a spectacular day and walk that my husband took to kind of kick off spring on Block Island. We start a little later because we're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And for those of you who have just tuned in for the first time, Block Island is the island that I live on. It's off the southern coast of Rhode Island, which is in New England on the eastern seaboard of the United States. And for those of you returning, thank you for coming back. And it's episode 51, which is just hard to believe. So I thank you for sticking with me. So anyway, getting back to the walk. So you start the walk on the Clayhead Trail, and you see some of that, and you're walking through the forest, and it just spills out onto a very rugged beach. We have on the eastern side of the island a beach called Crescent Beach, and it goes all the way from town, and it's in a crescent shape, and it ends where these big cliffs are, and this top of that cliff is called Clayhead. So you come out onto the beach, and if you look to the right, you can see town. You can see 4 of the 5 turbines that are in our wind power farm. And you see the ferries coming and going. If you look all the way to the left, you see those cliffs, and you can also see all the way out to the Newport Bridge on a clear day. And you get a good feel for the erosion that is happening on the island, especially on the northeast side of the island. And so that is a spectacular view. Now that trail, you spill out onto the beach, and then you get back on the trail and you start making your way up. And it's not really steep, but it's a good workout. So you start to make your way up the trail, and you're on the edge of that cliff. Now, over the years, the trail has been moved further and further away from the edge due to erosion. But even where the trail is now, you are on top of that cliff. And the color of the ocean that day, and I inserted a photo of that, and I may even include it again here, was all the colors I love. And the coastline around Block Island is quite sandy, and so we have the nickname of being the Bermuda of the North because of those colors. And that day it was aqua and teal, and it was just glorious. The best part of the hike that day was as we made our way to the top, if you're willing to check out all the little trails that go off to the left, you will be rewarded by stumbling across this property. It's private property, but the owners know that you're gonna come check this out if you can figure out how to see it. Over the years, they have planted tens of thousands of daffodil bulbs. And it was just like a field of daffodils. It was absolutely glorious. The closer you got to the edge of the cliff, the daffodils were still closed, but the further away you got from the cliff, they were all open. It was spectacular. There was a family photographing their children running through the daffodils, so I hope you enjoyed that. The forsythia were in bloom in our yard. We had some daffodils in our secret garden, nothing like what you just saw. And so we had a very nice introduction to spring. We've had some rainy, stormy weather in between, and now everything is purple. So we go from yellow to the lilacs are in bloom. My lilac bush was spectacular this year. I'm showing you a photo of that and the beautiful bouquet I brought into the house because they don't last that long, and I love that smell. So I just picked a big bouquet, enjoyed it over the weekend, and they're already spent, and the bush is already spent. But the irises are going to start coming up, and so now we're seeing purple. So that was the beginning of this whole vibe I was feeling, which was refresh, revive, restore, renew, reimagine. So we went off island for our annual doctor's appointments, and we were really close to these furniture stores, the big furniture stores. And I've had on my mind for quite some time to replace the furniture in my dining room. You've seen photos of my house, my living area, the kitchen, my studio, and the dining room. And all of the house, except for the dining room, over the 25 years that we have lived here, we've replaced all the cherry and all the very Queen Anne style furniture we had. Now, remember, we lived in Massachusetts. We lived in a big federal colonial home. We moved to North Carolina, and we lived in a kind of a Williamsburg style brick house that was very, the Queen Anne furniture worked there. It didn't work here. I have very few regrets in life, but one of the regrets I have is that I moved all that furniture from that big colonial house, or that, you know, that brick house, to Block Island. And it took 2 moving trucks on the ferry to get it here. And we lived with it. We lived with it for several years, but it became apparent that that furniture was so heavy and so dark. And this house has all these windows, which we see out on nature. We see blue and we see green and we see white. And that furniture just, for me, it clashed. So we redid the living area, we did our office, we did our guest rooms, we painted the walls, and that dining room was the last set of furniture. That was the Queen Anne. And so anyway, I'm showing you some photos. Ooh, the furniture delivery truck came right to the house, which if you live on Block Island, getting anything to deliver to your house is a treat. So they delivered it, they took the old furniture and they moved it downstairs because we had someone who wanted it, and set up the new furniture. I painted before they came, so that was the refresh. So I painted the walls and the woodwork and cleaned, and my old hutch took up an entire wall, and there are very few walls in this house. And I have a painting that my Uncle Peter gave to us when we got married, and he's since passed away. And this painting is a large sofa size, or you know, a large painting. And I've never really had the right place in any of the houses we've lived in to let it shine. It's been downstairs in our den over our couch, which we have our backs to it all the time. So I knew I didn't want a big hutch. I just wanted a buffet. And it's not that long a wall, but I found the perfect piece. And after I painted and the furniture arrived and I brought up the painting, I just had such a feeling of I've come full circle. So the view in that painting is the view from the first house my husband and I lived together in as a married couple. My husband had rented the house. He bought it right before we got married for us. It was heated, but it was more like a summer cottage, but that was the view. And my uncle came down one day and he did a sketch, a watercolor, quick little sketch. He called it a thumbprint, but it was more than a thumbprint. And then he went back home, and eventually this is the painting that we received. And see all the colors? All those colors also helped inspire the color theme and the vibe that I wanted in this house. So it was like coming full circle. So I hope you enjoyed the photos I showed you of the dining room and the process of getting to that. And on the bench, so my old dining room set had 8 chairs, and I had two armed chairs and 4 regular chairs, and the 2 leaves were in it, and I had that big hutch, and I had already given the buffet away years ago because I didn't have room for the buffet, and I just knew I didn't want all those chairs. We don't entertain like we used to, and so if I need 8, I have other chairs I can bring in. So I got a bench and I got 4 chairs with no arms, and it just opened up that room. So I don't know if you know what I mean by this, but it felt like the rest of the house felt airy and floating, and that dining room felt like it was dark and heavy. And now it just feels like it's all on the same wavelength. And so I'm very pleased with that, and I just wanted to share that with you. And on the bench, I put that gorgeous hand-woven shawl that Ivana from the Republic of Me gave to me as a gift last year, and it just looks beautiful on that bench. So that was the renew and the refresh. So I told my mother about the furniture, and I had sent her pictures of the furniture, and she said, "Have you eaten at your dining room yet?" And I said, "No, we haven't yet." And she's like, "How come you haven't eaten at your dining room table?" I said, "I know, we watched golf one night, and I gave her all these excuses of why we hadn't eaten at the table yet. It was because I was going to be going off for Mother's Day, and I was knitting my mother a shawl. And I blocked the shawl on the dining room table. So as soon as the dining room was photographed for my, purposes of using it on this video and to share with my mom, I got my blocking mats out and I blocked the shawl. So let's get to the knitting. So of course I've given it to her, so I can only show you these photos now. So this pattern was a pattern that I found online, and I'm giving you all the information below, and I'm showing you the designer's inspiration for the pattern, the photos from her pattern. And so I started to knit that. And I decided, because my mom said to me when she saw the shawl I had made for my girlfriend, Mary Lou, I showed you a photo of that last episode, my mom said, I don't have one of your shawls. And I said, oh, would you really wear a shawl? Because, you know, my mom's kind of petite. And she said, of course I would, especially when I go to hear music at the beach. So my mother goes to this beach, which is right on the Middletown Newport line. It's kind of a famous beach. It's called Easton's Beach. And when I think of Easton's Beach, I think of these colors that are in the shawl. The color of the sand, the color of the Atlantic Ocean, and the color of some of the seaweed that sometimes comes in. It's kind of a reddish green. And so I went looking through my stash, and I had this yarn from this sweater. And I'll include what yarn this is. And I had a skein of yarn that I purchased at Vogue Knitting Live the very first time I went, and I had never used it. There was no tag on it, but it was fingering weight. And then I had the Moondrake blue that was left over from my Knitting for Olive Fern sweater. And when I started putting these colors together, I said, my goodness, this looks like the beach. This looks like Easton's Beach. So I'm calling this the Easton's Beach shawl, even though I kind of modeled it after this pattern. So I want to give the designer credit for giving me the inspiration to knit this shape shawl. But I kind of took it and went with my own colors and my own concept. So here's a picture of Mom wearing it. So now I'll talk a little bit about the wonderful Mother's Day we had. So it was my friend Mary Lou, my sister-in-law Cindy, my mom, and me. So it was just the four of us. And we stayed at the iconic, famous, historic Viking Hotel in Newport, Rhode Island. And if any of you have watched the movie A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan story, you'll hear them talking about the Viking Hotel. And the original Viking Hotel is the part of the hotel we stayed in. And in the 60s, they put this, I think, very modern, didn't go with the flow, addition in the back of the hotel, which is where some of the footage of that movie was shot. Not in the front of the beautiful Viking Hotel. And I want to tell you a little bit about the Vikings. So let me get my glasses on and see if I can get to those notes. So first I'll start off with Newport. So my mother was born in Newport. My mother was raised in Newport. I was born in Newport. Newport is on the island of Aquidneck Island, where my mom lives now, in the town of Portsmouth. So Aquidneck Island is made up of three towns. It's Newport, which is actually the city, Middletown, which is in the middle, and Portsmouth, which is at the end. And you can only access Aquidneck Island by bridge, and there are 3 bridges. And it's known as a seaside city, and it's famous for so many things. So I'll start off by saying it is famous for its historic mansions. It's famous for the first U.S. Open of 2 tournaments, tennis and golf. It hosted the America's Cup for many years, which is a sailing regatta. Salve Regina College is there. The Naval War College is there, which is an important naval training center. It was the 18th major port city. Many of the buildings are from the colonial era. And it was founded in 1639. The oldest synagogue, Turo Synagogue, is in Newport, the oldest synagogue in America, I should say. 17th century religious tolerance in Newport attracted members of the Quakers. So we have the Great Friends Meeting House, which is in Newport, and it's the oldest existing structure of worship in Rhode Island. Let's see, what else can I tell you about Newport? It just goes on and on and on. It was the scene of much activity during the American Revolution. William Ellery was a Newport native, and he was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. It was in Newport that the Rhode Island General Assembly voted to ratify the Constitution in 1790, and Rhode Island became the 13th state. In the mid-19th century, wealthy southern planters came to Newport and built cottages to get out of the heat. And around mid-century, wealthy Northerners came to Newport, and they began building these large mansions, which Bellevue Avenue is a famous street where the Vanderbilts and the Astors and very famous wealthy families built these mansions. And today, you can visit these mansions, you can tour them. The movie with Mia Farrow and Robert Redford, The Great Gatsby, was filmed at Rosecliff Mansion, which is on Bellevue Avenue. So you're getting a little bit of feel for Newport. So Edith Wharton's novel, The Age of Innocence, describes the social scene in Newport during that time frame. And she owned a home in Newport called Land's End. Hammersmith Farm was owned by the Auchincloss family. Well, Jackie Bouvier Kennedy's stepfather was an Auchincloss, so the reception for her wedding was there. St. Mary's Church, which is one of the oldest, and I want to get this right, one of the oldest Catholic churches in Rhode Island, or in the country, I believe, is where their wedding was. Okay, so I'll get back to the Viking Hotel now. So it's Mother's Day. We're staying at the Viking Hotel. We're in Newport, and Newport has a lot of memories for my mom. She was born there. She grew up there. When she was dating my dad, he was a bellhop at the Viking Hotel. So she used to, there was a little cafe across the street, and she would sit at the cafe across the street. And if my father could get away for a break, he would take his jacket and go like this to give her the, I'll be there soon. But if he couldn't, he would just stand, straight. So she was sharing that memory with the bellhop who helped us check in. And there's a nice picture of her with him. Also, my dad played the Hawaiian steel guitar, and he played in a little band, and he played at the Viking occasionally. So here's a photo of my dad playing the Hawaiian steel guitar. So for my mom to be there and to share these stories with me and my sister-in-law and my friend, it was a real treat. And we had a little lunch across the street, and I had purchased tickets to see a documentary of this Italian chef cook called Marcella. And I don't know if you've ever heard of her. We certainly haven't, but I guess she was pretty famous. And she was from Italy, and it told her life story. And what we learned in this documentary is she was really the reason Americans learned about real Italian cooking. She brought she taught cooking lessons when she lived in Venice. She wrote cookbooks. She came to the States. She lived in New York. She was on all the morning talk shows. And I think had she had, and they alluded to this in the documentary, had she had a better command of the English language, she probably would have had her own cooking show. But she cooked alongside Julia Childs and Jacques Pépin. And so we walked down Turow Street, past the Turow Synagogue, by the City Hall, and to Washington Square, which is a little famous square. And we went to the Jane Pickens Theater, which is a historical theater, and we watched that documentary. Then we walked back up the hill, back to the Viking, got a little cleaned up for dinner, met at the lobby in the Viking and had an Aperol Spritz, which is an Italian aperitif cocktail. And then we walked down Bellevue Avenue to Beach Pasta, this wonderful Italian restaurant. So we had a wonderful Italian experience in Newport for Mother's Day. And we walked back through this beautiful park where there's a stone tower, which many historians believe the Vikings built. We walked by the Redwood Library, which is the oldest lending library in the country. So for Mom, it was just where she grew up. And for my friends, for my friend and my sister-in-law, myself, it was like, it's amazing how much history is here. And I have just scratched the surface. So if you ever think about coming to Newport or learning more about Newport, there is a ton of information online. So let's see. That was just a treat. So that shawl that I made for Mom was on my mind, and I went through my stash and I started looking at what else I could, what other yarns, so if you're a sock knitter, or if you knit these fingering weights sweaters, or if you've made the half and half triangle shawl, you've got tons of fingering weight left. I have, I showed you this jar of all these bits and pieces, and this is all fingering weight, and that's just the little balls, and then I have tubs with bigger balls. And so I loved the way Mom's sweater came out. And oh, by the way, I finished that with the picot edge that was part of the pattern, and I enjoyed that, and it looked really sweet because that had a very soft drapey look on Mom, and Mom is petite and she's feminine, and I loved the way that looked on her. I don't know if I'll do that on this one. So this yarn, Barbara, who is one of my viewers who has become a fast friend, who came to visit me on Block Island, who I chat with, gave me this beautiful yarn. This is a variegated yarn. And after I finished my Alpine Bloom, I had some of this yarn left over. And again, I'll have to look up what this was, but I had plenty of this. Oh, Charlemont. This was the Charlemont yarn by Valley Yarn. I had some of this left over. I used some on Mom's shawl, but I still had some more. And I had made these socks. And I had some of this yarn left over. So I used the same basic approach, and I'm working on this. So this was some fingering weight wool yarn. Here's the Charlemont. Here's the yarn in the Alpine Bloom. Here is the sock yarn. And I'm using the same idea. So it's going to be like a half radius. You know, one end has the, you're increasing only on one end, so you have the straight edge. And I'm very happy with the way this is coming out. And I think this is a great way to use up your fingering weight stash. And that's my plan. All right, so what else did I want to tell you? Oh my goodness. Well, let's see. I'm going to leave you with some more footage of our trip in Newport. Oh, I know. There was something else I wanted to tell you, and that's why I have this here. I talk about this everyday shawl. It's a Cocoa Knits design. I've talked about this quite a bit. I talked about it in the last episode. One of my viewers is knitting it right now, and she's knitting it on a mohair yarn, and she's using the size needle, which is the recommended needle, and she was concerned because her edges are curling because it's stocking knit. And yes, it's going to curl a little bit. What I did is and I think you're supposed to slip the first stitch, so that will help a little bit. But before I put the ruffle on it, I lay it flat on my ironing board and I lightly steam it. I don't block this. I just lightly steam it. And so as you can see, it is going to have the slightest roll, but it doesn't interrupt how it sits on you. You see? It lays it looks like a finished edge, I think. It looks like a finished edge. So if you're thinking about making this, that's just another little thing to keep in mind. That is, this is the easiest little knit. So I'm glad that you're making it, and I hope that you'll be comfortable with the way the edging after you steam block it. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. I don't really know what's on my mind right now other than gardening. My husband and I are going to go off. We're going to go to our favorite little nursery, the Farmer's Daughter. I'll get a little footage. I usually do that every year. And I mentioned to you, I am going to put some 8-foot raised beds on my back deck, and I'm going to plant some more vegetables that I have in the past. I'm going to try some trellises. I'm going to try to grow some small cucumbers, maybe some green beans. I am definitely going to grow peppers, jalapeno, and maybe like a bell pepper. I want to put in some red onions. 2 years ago, I had very good luck with that. I won't plant as many. I had so many that I ended up making a lot of pickled onions, which was nice. I am going to grow tomatoes, and I do want to try some more flowers, cutting flowers. I did plant some seeds. I donate to the breast cancer foundation, the Susan B. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation. They sent me some seeds of some pink cosmos, and those seedlings are coming up fine. So, and I planted some marigolds. So we'll see how. I've never done seedlings successfully. My mother has, so she's given me the encouragement to give that a try. So I will transplant some of those seedlings and get our decks ready and start working towards, a summer vibe in our yard and in our home. So again, thank you for watching. I hope you're in a good place. Oh, and I do have one other thing. In the last episode, I told you about an interview that I saw with Oprah and Maria Shriver. And Maria Shriver has written a book, and it's called I Am Maria. And I really enjoyed that interview. And I always enjoy hearing a memoir or a biography or a story about a strong woman and how she arrived at that strength. And I mentioned to you that, she's a Shriver, but her mother was a Kennedy, and she grew up in that male-dominated political family, and also dad was responsible for the Peace Corps. I mean, just her mother said to her, what are you going to do to change the world? So anyway, my friend Mary Lou gave me the book when we got together in Newport, I Am Maria. So the book is poetry. However, the opening chapter kind of reviews what Maria shared with Oprah during the interview, and I'm very much looking forward to reading this. So on the front cover, Maria says, my reflections and poems on heartbreak, healing, and finding your way home. It's a #1 New York Times she is a #1 New York Times bestseller. And on the back, she says, I never imagined writing poetry would help me embark on a journey deep into myself. I never imagined that everything I sought or thought I needed was within me all along. From I Am Maria. So maybe you want to see the interview. Maybe you want to try the book. I'll see you again soon. Bye.